Let's start this video off by addressing a little bit of the elephant in the room. In my last video, we were talking about a handful of different subjects, and I said that we were going to talk later in the video about the multi-platform strategy, why we're seeing that work more and more, and why we're seeing the exclusive, namely the third-party exclusive, declining in favorability among gamers and publishers, and I completely forgot. So thank you, Purple Haze, for bringing that to my attention. We are going to spend some time later in this video as just a community discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about that before we jump into our message of hope today. But ultimately, what we're talking about here is Thomas has been asking for some feedback. He's been given some ideas of what the team is working on for the next update. And as I like to keep you guys all up to date on what is happening, for the hardcore of us who are anxiously waiting the update, but also for the casual out there who is just generally curious about whether they should or should not play this game, here's a little bit of an update. Here's some information and news. Now, this isn't going to be groundbreaking for all of us who are just like really wanting a date, really wanting consoles, but we are seeing that work towards it. And if you guys enjoy No Rest for the Wicked, Light No Fire, action RPGs, survival RPGs, and a little bit of the culture war from time to time, welcome in. I always try to bring a level of nuance to these discussions, and yeah, that is something very interesting to me. Being called both far left and far right feels like I'm achieving that level of nuance that I like to bring. But if you guys want to stick around, just like Titus here, the subscription button is somewhere around here. And if you do find it, sound off below. I'd love to welcome you guys officially to the channel. Now, let's get into why you clicked on the video. Thomas has been updating us on Discord. It kicks off yesterday with a, yo, folks, would like to get some feedback. We're thinking about changing the way food stuff works. Now, right now, there's a cooldown timer whenever you consume any food, but we're thinking about changing that to a hunger system instead. What we're seeing is that people can run into zones that they shouldn't be able to, and with a ton of food that they've made, can even defeat bosses by just constantly spamming foods. So he continues. So what this system does is it's going to remove the food cooldown. I don't know why I struggle with the word food there, but it is what it is. But when you're in combat, you can only eat X amounts of food. Every time you eat something while in combat, the bar on the food icon will fill up, letting you know how many times that you can still eat in this encounter. Now, once you're out of combat, you can eat however many things you want again. What are your guys' thoughts? Initially, like just to jump in here with some of my thoughts that I have just in reading this as I was preparing this video, this sounds in a way kind of like a reverse Souls-like system. You know how you get various different potions or drinks or charges of that, and then when you go and rest, they fill up, but that does cause the enemies to respawn. Thomas actually addresses that later in a couple messages, and we'll get to that, but I just think that's essentially, in a way, an interesting kind of look at it. I do wonder, though, how it's going to feel, and I'm not going to speculate whether I'm going to be a fan of it or not, but as soon as we get to go hands-on with it, which it sounds like this is a system that is being developed and it's got a little bit of life to it, maybe meaning we are going to see it in the next update, maybe in November. We'll keep you guys up to date. I do owe you guys 5 gifted memberships, unless for some reason they do a surprise rollout. They're not going to do a surprise rollout. They're going to market this next major update in a big way, which I think is essentially something going to be exciting for everybody who has ever purchased the game so far, or who is still sitting on the fence waiting for it to get closer and closer. But he continues. Also, the other thing, we've decoupled stacking from inventory chests so that now all chests, you can actually put 99 items of everything in them instead of having the same stack limit that you have in your inventory. This is huge. So excited for this. 99 is a great number. He goes on because he's not done. He says, I'm guessing this change is everybody's on board with. Well, absolutely we're on board with it. And he goes, he says, might even allow the player to go past 99 later. Give me progression around all these different things. Let me invest in these characters and these quality of life things. I don't want, especially an RPG, to just straight up hand me stuff. It feels like, you know, having that earned mentality of I've progressed this game, I've progressed my character. That's just my perspective. That was my biggest gripe with Anthem, is that they never put in those real RPG mechanics. Same thing with Final Fantasy 16 to a degree. And while I love both games for different reasons, and yes, it was tragic that EA pulled the plug on Anthem. I still think that they could have brought it back. I think they could have remastered, you know, and relaunched it as a 2.0. Unfortunately, that wasn't what history ended up unfolding. Anyway, that's an aside. I apologize. Let's get back on track. I'm loving that they're doing this. But when asked regarding the food, Lynn says, is there an alternative method for healing during combat if this were in place? And Thomas says, yes, enchantments will be one way of healing. And Dark Meme God says, also, we have healing runes as well, which is a really important piece of context, especially when multiplayer is involved. Thomas does say, and that in response to Dank Meme God, as my voice cracks because of puberty and as I misread words because of dyslexia. Welcome in, everybody. I'm really glad you're here. All right. Lynn follows it up, says, my only worry is that the hunger meter that's going to add passive healing may make boss fights a slug, or alternatively require you to spin a rune slot on a healing rune. And an enchantment, of course. Sounds promising, though. I'm not against trying it out. And Thomas says, we're trying it out now. This should also make people care about crafting better food so that people don't just spam 500 mushroom soups all day long. And he obviously does the crying or laughing, laugh, cry face emoji in this case. I do think that's going to be interesting, especially if you start to value food. My history with food in video games is that there's other benefits to eating food. And so being that you can spam food outside of fights, it is seeming like just a mechanic to kind of keep that fight locked in, as opposed to like a real true hunger system, a real true you need to eat food so that you can survive. And maybe there'll be some more passive benefits, whether you're eating to a full stomach or whatnot. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially about all this, but you can always go join their Discord and weigh in directly with the devs. As you can see here, they continue to keep us all up to date. Dank Meme God says, do you not like how quickly you can eat the food? Thomas replies, I'm guessing the issue is just contextualization, that it's a bit ridiculous that you're healing yourself in combat by just quickly munching on a steak. And so this is where he gets into the Souls-like combat discussion here, saying, I've dismissed countless of Edis-like proposals over the years because none of them really solve the issue that we have with healing, especially giving multiplayers a thing. Atticus works great in Souls, but it only works if healing is tied to enemy respawns. Well, and in regards to basically being inherently against them because it always boils down to just a Dark Souls copy, Thomas responds, well, it's a great system to be fair, but you wouldn't want to be in the Black Trench and have cleared a room and another player is activating a whisper and bam, all the enemies respawn around you. And Editus without enemies respawning doesn't work. That just means that you could go back to a whisper every fight and just keep refreshing your heals, which sucks. And then finally we got one more comment. Snaz Blaster says, can we get some sort of small buff when we hit max level fullness in an encounter? It would be a fun risk versus reward mechanic. Do I gorge myself right away and get fullness buff right away? Or do I save my food for an emergency heals? And Thomas responds, that's an interesting idea. So that's the update, guys. So we're going to jump into kind of the little bit of community discussion that I forgot to give you guys in the last video. We've got a couple other videos that I'm working on. I do apologize. I've been really busy with T-Ball, and to be clear, I don't owe you guys an apology. It's more just that there's things that I've been wanting to do content-wise, but there's things that I get to do as a father, and we're having a lot of fun behind the scenes. So I do hope to bring you guys some Star Citizen update videos. I do hope to bring you some update videos more on a lot of topics, a lot of scripts being written behind the scenes. Ultimately, we will get there when we get there. Let's talk about why multi-platform is the strategy that is winning despite its challenges, because there is no easy solution to delivering a game, whether it's to one system or a broad range. Now, delivering to multiple systems has gotten easier as these systems have become more and more like mini PCs, for example. They're very similar in terms of their architecture, so you don't end up having to do as much extra lifting, but it still doesn't mean that it's zero. There is definitely some work involved. But we're seeing in terms of reception something interesting. And to be fair, there's a few factors that are playing out with this. First factor is the economy. You know, I guess the phrase when you see it is like, it was the economy, stupid. Like, it's the economy. What we used to see in game development is because money and capital was so cheap, companies would maybe borrow their the money, they would leverage their capital so they'd get the loan for maybe 2%. But then they would keep their capital, their own money, in an account that's earning maybe 5 or 6 or more percent. The higher the percentage, probably the greater risk you have within that. But they were arbitraging some of that development. So they were able to keep their capital, make new games, and continue to build that capital and earn interest off that and fund more games. So what's happened? Well, money isn't cheap anymore. Just in the increase of the interest rate, I don't know if anybody's ever tried to purchase a car like on a loan or, you know, a house right now. It is much, much higher than it used to be. And that actually does mean that your money doesn't go as far. So what you're seeing is that it isn't, you don't have that avenue. The other things, you got a couple things like Gamergate 2.0. Obviously, a lot of people are doing a lot of different things. But in terms of just the economics behind it, you have to, because the increasing cost of games, the cost is actually, I think, the red herring. I think it really shifts into the risk of it. And we're seeing that play out, I think, in real time over 2024 with a marketplace of ideas in full effect. So what I mean by this is, like, let's just take two games, for example, Final Fantasy 16 and Metaphor. Both, I would say, are incredibly fun games to each offer something vastly different. Final Fantasy 16, the latest in the storied franchise, but you can see here the cost of the PS5 launch exclusivity and the ignoring of PC, with the numbers only hitting up to 27,000 in terms of peak concurrent. Now, concurrent doesn't mean total players, but it did sell a decent amount, and it did sell on PlayStation. But what you continually hear from these companies is it's underperformed because the overall cost didn't either make a profit. I think Final Fantasy 16 is profitable, but in terms of what they expected, the profit they expected from it, it did not live up to expectations. Metaphor really rocking and rolling, coming out on all platforms. I got it actually on the Xbox store because it's cross-buy on Xbox, which was like, I was like, oh, that's something that I like. Let me go ahead and support it there. And it's an incredible game, but those players and the console players are also not leveraged into this, but it does show you this is a good example of how marketing dollars truly can help push your games. Because let's be honest, who here hasn't bought a game just because of hype and later go on to be like, I really didn't like that game? You know, this year alone, Suicide Squad, like, I didn't want to buy it. My friend talked me into it. Really wish I didn't buy it. Don't play it. I literally set that down really quickly. So that was definitely something that, you know, is an example of hype, but many other gamers also have rejected that game as well. The cost of being exclusive means that marketing spend is going to not get the return on it. So game development is one piece of the puzzle. Marketing cost is another piece of the puzzle. And when it's all said and done, if you don't sell the game, that's what the goal is. If you're not selling, it is going to be in a continually increasing risk, and you're going to see less and less games being made. So we are seeing, I think, a contraction of it. Now, the other elephant in the room here is obviously consoles like Sony and Nintendo. They will, I believe, at least for the, you know, the future within the next 5-10 years, will still make the console exclusive because they use those to leverage console sales and make it up on the back end with selling games through their various different stores. Nintendo's a whole different beast because they make a profit on everything they sell, so they don't feel like they have to subsidize their systems and their consoles just to make it market acceptable. Whether we like that or not, like, that is what it is. But that's going to, I think, going to continue. This really is a discussion about the third parties, and I think what we will end up seeing is we're already seeing more and more of it with new games announcing they're not accepting an exclusivity deal with Sony because it isn't actually in their best interest. The cost that Sony would have to spend to make it worthwhile has also gone up dramatically to where it might be just a thing we remember as, you know, as we get older, where our kids maybe never know that there were third-party exclusives launching in the history. So it is something, I think, to be like, just to be pondered, and to be, you know, as somebody who really likes the industry and who really likes gaming, always to kind of see how things end up being received over the long run. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can let me know, like, are you somebody who absolutely loves that there are exclusive games for your preferred platform? I think as somebody like me who's not telling anybody just go get a PC by any means, please don't hear that. I just look at it and say, these are where I prefer to play. I've got enough backlog. I've got enough games that I can actually wait for your game to come out. I don't need to go and buy that game right now because I have other things I can play, like No Rest for the Wicked and like Wukong. And there's so many really great games this year. I've been playing through Final Fantasy IV, the Pixel remasters, having a really great time, you know, with that, playing the new COD with my wife every night right now. And it's been a blast. So we're having a good fun game time here in the household. All right, let's finalize this video with our message of hope. I want to talk to you guys about anxiety because I don't know if anybody out there has suffered with anxiety before. For me, when it kicked up in my 30s, it felt debilitating. Like it was very frustrating because like anxiety it feels like almost in a way a level of paralysis, but a kind of a constant state of panic and paralysis. It's just this awful, awful feeling. And if you're going through a lot of that right now, my heart goes out to you. I'm going to share some of the things that worked for me. Maybe they'll work for you, but what I want to encourage you guys, especially as we try to sharpen one another, as we try to encourage each other, I'm going to say as men, because this is kind of like our virtual men's group in this case, but I'm going to share a couple of things that I've done, and hopefully you might get some value out of that. So first thing first, I actually do have an appreciation for getting anxiety in the first place. My dad has social anxiety. He always has. I never understood it. So when all of a sudden I was able to experience, not through social interaction, but just general anxiety, it actually made me, relate more to my dad than I had ever in the past. And I open up with that kind of note because I know it sucks and I wouldn't wish anxiety on my worst enemy, for example. But sometimes I find that you can find value, you can find that diamond in the rough when you have the perspective of time. So if you're having anxiety attacks, if you're suffering with a lot of anxiety right now, just note that there are things that we can be doing, and I want to encourage you to continue to fight for yourself. And then given enough time, you might be looking back and actually finding what was learned, what was the lesson. And it could be that you can pass on the things that you did to another generation or to another person who is suffering. And so you can take that experience and ideally make it something that has value, that is good for us all to share. So for me though, I continue to share, like, one of the main issues is I had a hormonal imbalance. My testosterone was garbage. And I'm not talking about like, it's a little bit low. No, I'm talking about like dangerously low. Like, we got to check you and make sure you don't have cancer low. Thankfully, cancer free. I'm going to keep rocking that and hopefully going to continue that on for a very long time. Time will tell. Anyhow, that was kind of my root issue. It took me 10 years to figure that out. And it sucks, right? Because it's like, everybody was like, there's no possible way. And eventually I had to get crazy and radical and retire and really restructure my life and my content around how do I figure out how to fix myself. Well, there is a problem. Nobody eats chicken and broccoli every day, all day, and just constantly gains weight. Like, I'm not eating enough chicken. And so then people were like, maybe you're not eating enough. And I would eat more and I would only gain weight faster, which led into anxiety and all the times that we had to go to the hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. Thankfully, every doctor came back. You're like, your heart's great. There's currently no red flags. If that ever changes, I'll let you guys know. But for the time being, as somebody who struggled with that, there was a lot of anger like wrapped up in that. I'm not going to lie. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of depression and frustration. But beyond that, food and exercise were like a life-saving bomb, if we're being honest, because to be, why is this important? I can, my dark thoughts, because of, I constantly was gaining weight and I was just eating chicken and broccoli, like, for almost every meal. Occasionally we'd go out and it would be to the point where I'd go and have like a slice of pizza, with my wife and something like that. And the thought would pop in. It's like, maybe I should just eat myself to death. Like, if I'm going to be this weight and I'm not, eating these foods to gain this weight, what am I doing here? And so that's the dark thought that I had. And thankfully, you know, and that's why I want to always kind of have these real moments with you guys. That's something that obviously I didn't give into. I kept fighting. And it's not that you have to fight 365, 24/7, and you're just so fatigued you can't even think straight. But more or less that give yourself some grace, step back, take a breath, and focus in on what you can control and experiment. I want you to get radically curious. I want you to get so radically curious that you will try different foods. You will eliminate different foods. You will say, hey, how does this actually make me feel? I would say get a log, get as crazy as I did, and just write what you ate, what you did, and then how you felt about it. And then you can kind of look back with almost that you know, analyst approach and saying, hey, you know, when I was doing this, I was really starting to feel better. And when I did this, there were some issues. Maybe my anxiety kicked up. So that's what I want to encourage you guys. Get radical, figure out, you know, all these different things. Obviously, never be afraid to work with a therapist, because there are chemical imbalances. There's endless amounts. I'm not going to say that just changing your diet is going to solve all your problems, but it's a start. And this in and of itself is a journey. And I think, you know, and I would bet money on it, is that you choosing to live and survive and to work on this thing is going to pay off 1,000,000 times. The suffering that the temporary suffering that you got to kind of go through now to figure out what's going on will pay out immensely. I'd put money on that. And so anyway, that's going to be my discussion for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for hanging out for this video. And if you stuck around for the message of hope, God bless you guys. Praying for you. I hope that you have a most excellent day. And hopefully I'll see you in my next video. But until then, take care.